Tuesday. I hope you guys are doing pretty well. So today, as part of the Wealth Game series, sponsored by RTV Advisors, Wells Fargo, the Hispanic Chamber of E-commerce, and the U.S. Business Association of E-commerce, today we have two very special guests who are going to be talking to us about the 50-point business checkup. We're going to be learning from David Calderon, which is the senior partner at Barth Calderon, and he's also the head of the dispute resolution practice within the firm. And we also have Paul, which is the director, Paul Hitchcock, which is the director of business development at Barth Calderon LLP, an asset protection and estate planning attorneys serving clients nationwide. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Juan Pablo, and great to be
Thank
here.
you.
Yeah, and so hello, everybody. And I just want to mention a bit about our firm as we get into this, because I think it's important. And we are a law firm. We're focused on asset protection, estate planning, business planning, and we have been around for 30 years. I think, David, we're actually celebrating our 30-year anniversary this month, are we not?
That is correct.
I think, yeah. And we have clients across the country. A lot of our clients are business owners, small, medium, and large. We put on about 40 workshops a year across the country to many business organizations, including Vistage International, Chambers of Commerce, apartment associations, and many others. And David is one of our top speakers at the firm, and high demand for these sort of talks that he gives. And as Juan Pablo said, David is a partner at the firm and one of our expert attorneys in asset protection, estate planning, and business planning. And I want to mention, too, that I know the link to our website is going to be put up along with this presentation. And if you go visit our website, you can see the people, see who we are. There it is. And on the top section there, anybody can click on and schedule a one-to-one complimentary planning assessment with David. Happy to do that. We always love to give back to those who attend our events. And whatever issue you have, whether it's something you hear on this presentation, or maybe it's estate planning, you don't have that, or something going on with your business, or liability, looking at legal structures for your business like limited liability companies, those are all the things we do. And you can click on the website and book a time to get your complimentary assessment. And so, David, as we get into what we are calling here the 50-point business checkup, we're going to dive in, and this touches on really the 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 procedures of the business, but also gets into a bit of asset protection, because without these things, you're exposing yourself to liability. Maybe we'll talk a bit about that, but let's jump into it, David.
Yeah, no, the 50-point business checkup is 100% geared towards asset protection and preservation, because really what it's there to do is to check on the health of your business, right? So it also bleeds into personal asset protection a little bit, because, let's face it, any given year you make visits to your doctor to have a physical, right? The doctor will run a physical. Doctor will check out all sorts of vital signs, symptoms, maybe do blood work and tests, and and give you a report or tell you about things that the doctor may recommend that you might want to do to improve your overall health. You go to your accountant. To do your taxes, possibly to keep your books, but to help guide you and point out problems that you have regarding your tax obligations, hopefully refunds. If you're fortunate, knock on wood, and just check on your overall financial health. You take your car to a mechanic, not only when something goes wrong, hopefully, but just for periodic maintenance. To go in, they again run tests, things. They tell you, maybe check your oil, check your tires. May tell you when something is worn and torn and needs some repair. It shouldn't be any different in operating a business. We call it a 50-point business checkup because it's kind of like going to the mechanic or going to the doctor.
Right.
We take a holistic look at your business, all areas of what you do and how you do it. and make recommendations based on the things that we that we see. And I usually am the one who leads the charge on the 50-point business checkup, because in my 30 years of practicing law, I've pretty much seen it all. I've done everything from negotiate multi-million-dollar business transactions to complex estate plans and asset protection setups. But I've also handled jury trials, court trials, appeals, stuff all the way up to the Supreme Court. So from the boardroom to the courtroom, I have a lot of experience in dealing with what, the day-to-day things that businesses have to deal with from a business owner's perspective and also from a lawyer's perspective. So it gives me a keen eye and enables me to hone in on specific issues or problems you might have and help you find workable solutions to those problems that fit your budget, and also not hopefully too disruptive to your business endeavors.
Yeah, and David, as we get into this and get into some of the detail of what is covered within the 50-point business checkup, is this for any industry, any size of business? Is this important information to know?
Definitely. I think anybody who's doing business, needs to have their contracts reviewed from time to time, their policies, their business structure, their organizational structure, how they do business, how they choose to do business as either an entity or even as a sole proprietor. Liability is out there. Lawsuits are a multi-billion-dollar industry in this country, and unfortunately, as a business owner, everybody that you do business with, unfortunately, is a potential point of liability. And so many business owners focus on chasing revenue, which is, as a business person, exactly what you got to do. If you don't have, no bucks, no Buck Rogers for old space exploration type folks. If you don't have money, you're not going to be able to really do anything else. But at the same token, a lot of times they do that and kind of neglect the back door, and the back door is where usually all the problems are lurking. Not always necessarily at your front door, but usually at the back door. So what we try to do with our clients is to help them take care of the stuff that's lurking at the back door.
Got it. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So as we get into the 50-point checkup, the processes, let's kind of dive into a bit some of the areas you cover. Maybe we'll get into the weeds a little bit on those areas. So what would be one place to start there?
Well, we audit your corporate governance documents and procedures, the types of things, how your business is structured and set up. What are your internal procedures? We look at your operational systems. How's your business set up and how do you do business?
Let me ask you that real quick. So because you mentioned the structure of the business, let's start there.
Yeah.
So when you're starting a business, or if you have an existing business, talk about the legal structure of the business. The S corp versus the LLC, the positives related to the asset protection part of that.
Well, I don't know exactly what the scope is of how big some of the business are, owners that we're dealing with here, how big their businesses are, or how many customers they have, or what have you. But, if you start with like a sole proprietorship, if you're just in business for yourself, maybe you have a DBA, you may be David Calderon doing business as, we sell on eBay kind of thing or something like that. All of the exposure from your business is going to fall on you personally. So, all the liabilities, all the problems, anything, you're going to be personally responsible for. Okay, so that's just if you're a sole proprietorship. If you decide to incorporate, like say an S corp or a C corp, and S and C corps really differentiate the main differentiator in those types of entities are the way they're taxed, right? So I won't get too much into the weeds on that, but you create a corporate entity, right? A corporate entity is its own separate structure, separate and apart from you personally. So you create a C corp, you take your business, put it in the C corp or the S corp in the corporation, and it creates a shell or a barrier of liability between yourself and the business, right? Now, having a corporation would require you to maintain separate books and records, separate contracts. You have to have bank accounts for the corporation. You have to have all the proper filings with the state of California, tax filings, things of that nature. So it's a bit more complex and involved from a business perspective, but
Right.
it provides a whole bunch of asset protection. And depending on your level of risk, I mean, if you were, there may be some businesses that do not have a lot of risk, and then some businesses, you may be a nuclear waste hauler, or something along those lines, or you're transporting real high risk or real expensive goods, or acting as a broker for that. Then you may want to really consider either forming a corporation to protect yourself. The corporation will hold your business, or form the other alternative, which is a limited liability company. And a limited liability company, we find most of our clients these days, the majority of the formations, when we help a client convert from maybe, say, a sole practitioner to a corporate or LLC entity, they'll usually choose the LLC entity because it's easy to form. You don't have as much of the housekeeping requirements that you have with a corporation. You can have an operating agreement that basically sets forth the rules of the road for the organization. And it has great asset protection qualities to it that are probably better from a personal asset protection standpoint than a corporation. The one big problem in differentiating a corporation and an LLC is that if someone gets a judgment with you as a corporation, and you don't have enough money necessarily to pay off that judgment, or enough insurance, the creditor can possibly come in and seize your shares in that corporation and take over your business. Maybe not such a huge
Because
deal.
well, I was going to say,
Yeah,
even though you're not a publicly traded company, you still have stock in your company.
correct.
You own stock, and creditors take stock all the time, right? I've heard you say that.
Yes, no, that is true, and it depends. If it's a business that really kind of if it's an inventory heavy business, that could be a really big problem. Or somebody, if you're selling
Right.
goods, you're selling stuff. Someone comes in and takes your shares and then liquidates all your inventory, and bam, you're done. With a limited liability company, in many cases, a creditor cannot do that. Where a creditor can come in, if you're a sole proprietor, they can go straight after your stuff. If you're a corporation, they have to try to bust through the corporate shell and get to your shares in the company, which they can do. An LLC, they can't necessarily do that. They can get what's called a charging order, which really means that they get a lien on any distributions or money that comes forth from the LLC back to you personally in the form of ownership distributions, or stock, you call it dividend. But they can't take your interest in the limited liability company, nor can they go in there and run it and manage it and maybe liquidate all of your stuff in order to squeeze every last drop out of the LLC. So if you're looking in terms of asset protection, I would say from worst to best, or better, it would be sole proprietorship worst, corporation better, LLC usually, and it depends. People have different situations all the time.
Right.
That's part of the reason why you come to a lawyer, to evaluate those based on your own personal situation. But LLC is usually best.
And when I think about the size of the businesses, and I know for the Chamber of Commerce here, we understand the size of the businesses in the neighborhood. Many of them are in the $750 to $1 million range or below. And it seems to me, I've heard you talk, David, that asset protection, even though a business may not be worth, $1 billion, it almost is more important when it's a smaller business, because it's everything you got. And it is your life, right? I mean, you put this blood, sweat, and tears into the business. You're working hard, and a single liability can wipe out your lifestyle. I always think about that.
Yeah, especially if you're not planned for it. I mean, let's face it, $1 billion, your business may not be $1 billion business to Jeff Bezos,
Right.
but it might as well be $1 billion business to you if you depend on
Exactly.
that. Your livelihood, your family depends on it to put food on the table, to pay a mortgage, send your kids to school, that kind of thing. So, the old adage, I think it's Benjamin Franklin, the old one of our U.S. founding fathers, who said that An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that is 100% correct. And it's a lot cheaper a lot of times for an ounce of prevention than it is to try to pay for a pound of cure after something happens. That's really devastating.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So we've talked about legal structure with checking on your business, and then what's the next area that you would cover?
Well, let's go. I guess maybe to rewind it a little bit or go back. I mean, look at your liabilities potential liabilities you have in your business,
Yeah.
right? Wage and hour issues with employees, contracts with vendors and customers. You may end up with a harassment case, especially if you supervise people directly or you have middle management that supervises people directly, wrongful termination, other employment claims, things that are not covered by insurance. There is the employer practices liability insurance that's available. Some of you may have that. It's usually pretty expensive, and there's tons of exclusions and limitations to that. So looking, I guess in that respect, one of the things we would examine in addition to the corporate governance stuff are your operational systems. What do you have? What's your structure like that's below you? How do you do business? What's
Right.
your flow chart look like? That sort of thing. So that would be another thing that we look at.
Okay. All right. And then as you get into the weeds of the business, what are some of the pitfalls you see when you're looking at businesses? Like where are problems coming up?
I think problems usually stem from lack of procedures, maybe lack of corporate of policies and dealing with employees, lack of really good solid contracts that are reviewed all the time, not only contracts with customers but contracts with vendors, suppliers, lease issues, personal guarantees, other agreements like that people have. Just lack of systems. Also sometimes you may not have proper accounting. You may be in a situation, especially if you're a smaller business, where there's the old adage of, I guess, like taking from Peter to pay Paul, where you're mixing and matching your personal funds and mingling it with your business funds to the point where people can't tell the difference between which is which. So maybe
Right.
instead of doing a thing where you give the money business, maybe you loan or loan money to the business, right? Instead of simply just taking money out of your bank account and sticking it in your business account. You loan that money to them, and you have a contract, and you have a separate entity and a wall between the two of you. That sort of thing. So those are kind of the things that we really see, and a lot of it, just like I said, is not your fault. From standpoint of, there are either things that you don't anticipate, or there are things that kind of get lost in the cause of trying to get out and build your business, maintain and get revenue.
Right. The personal guarantees. Talk about that. How do you get in trouble with a personal guarantee? I mean, what's like a case study of where a personal guarantee could go wrong and you get nailed?
Maybe you go and say you're a manufacturing company, or maybe you're just a middleman and you warehouse stuff to sell, right? Maybe you're a distribution person where you buy yo-yos from the company that makes yo-yos, and then you sell them to the public, be it their storefronts, Amazon, e-commerce, whatever. And you need a really big warehouse to store yo-yos, right? You have this little kids toy thing, and you got all these yo-yos you bought from a manufacturer in China. You're going to go send and sell to Walmart, Target, sell them on eBay, sell them on Amazon, what have you.
Right.
And so you need a big building to store these yo-yos. So you figure, oh, this is great. I've already got these product channels, distribution. These folks have promised they're going to buy X amount of yo-yos for me, this, that, and the other. So you go and you rent a warehouse, and this giant warehouse, maybe the Inland Empire, Orange County, North San Diego, whatever. And no problem. I can cover this nut. This is my business can handle this. I've got a LLC that owns the yo-yo business. They can rent this warehouse out. We're going to sell enough yo-yos to pay the rent. No problem, right? So you rent this big warehouse out, and the landlord says, well, I'm not going to rent this to you unless you personally guarantee it. I'm perfectly happy to put the lease in the name of the limited liability company, but I want you to personally guarantee it. So if something goes wrong on your 5-year lease on the warehouse or 10-year lease or what have you, you're going to personally guarantee that the rent gets paid. And a lot of times people will say, yeah, no problem. I've got all these yo-yo deals, that are no problem. I'm going to get rid of the yo-yos, make the money. We're going to be in like Flint, right? So you sign the personal guarantee without thinking much. The personal guarantee basically says everything that you own, your houses, your bank accounts, all property you got, everything, your business is going to guarantee this lease if something happens to the LLC that sells yo-yos. So, next thing you know, you got a giant cargo ship coming in that's sailing across the Pacific from China that has, hundreds of thousands of yo-yos that you're going to go sell. That ship sinks for some mysterious reason. There's a giant storm in the Pacific or something goes wrong where your yo-yos don't come, and you got this big empty warehouse and you can't sell these things and generate revenue. You default on your lease, right? Or the company that you have, the LLC, defaults on the lease and tells the landlord, look, I can't pay the rent. I need to get out of this. The landlord's going to turn around and say, I don't care. I've got this personal guarantee where you have guaranteed that you're going to pay the rent every month, no matter what. And so if you don't pay the rent, not only am I going to sue you to recoup or take this warehouse back, but I'm also going to come after you personally for the remainder of the rent and get a money judgment against you. So that's one, area through no fault of your own, even like maybe an act of God or something that where, you're unable to pay the rent on that warehouse. They may have maybe year 1 into the lease, you got 4 years left that you got to pay, where the landlord's going to look to you personally for payment instead of business because you signed a personal guarantee saying that rent will be paid.
Yeah, and you bring to mind too something that our firm was dealing with, where a franchise owner, I think it was a Subway franchise, but was expanding, signing personal guarantees along the way, and then a couple of the new Subways didn't pan out, and there were personal guarantees, and they really came back to haunt him, and I remember that scenario.
Yeah, and in the franchisee space, not only are you signing personal guarantees on real estate and equipment that you need for the restaurant, right? You lease, right. Most people lease that equipment. They lease the premises that the business operates on. They also have personal guarantees with the franchisor a lot of times, right? That you're going to make your sales. Right. You're going to hit your 4% or whatever they extract out of you to use the name Subway or Burger King or McDonald's or whatever.
Yep. David, you mentioned owner agreements. Does that include buy-sell agreements? And what are you looking for with owner agreements? I mean, is the problem is you don't see them often? Like business partners don't have a buy-sell? I mean, what's the whole deal with owner agreements?
Yeah, especially if you're in a situation where you own your business with another individual or several individuals or entities, even maybe companies have come in and invested. You've got a business that's owned by 3, 4, or 5 people. A lot of times, in those situations, you'll run into businesses who haven't properly planned for the demise of one of the owners, right? Where one of the owners may decide, I don't want to be part of this business anymore, or one of the owners may get divorced if they're married. One of the owners passes away, which is usually the number one trigger in that. Then what do we do? Like if you've got 4 owners of a business and they all own 25%, what do we do with the 25% that's with the deceased owner? And so a lot of times, if that's the case, as part of this 50-point business checkup, we may recommend that you do what's called a buy-sell or a control agreement with the 4 owners of the business, where if something happens to the one of you, there's a way for the person who's either deceased or maybe becomes disabled to the point where they can't work, or simply wants out, they can sell their 25% interest back to the other partners or the company at a predetermined price that's set on the value of the business, which could be underwritten with insurance. If it's a death situation with life insurance, for example, disability, it could be disability insurance, or it can be done in a way where it provides maybe a lump sum cash payment with a promissory note to provide flexibility for the other 3 business owners that are still left holding the bag on the business. But it makes so, like, say, if you've got 4 people that own the business, like 25% of the business each, what it means is that if, say, all 4 of them are married, but it's the one spouse that's involved in the running of the business, not the other spouse, right? So what it prevents is a situation where if one of those 4 owners passes away, that their 25% doesn't directly fall into the hands of that deceased person's spouse. And that deceased person's spouse also is now your partner in the business, may not know anything about the business, may not want any part of it. What it provides is a mechanism for that spouse, the surviving spouse, to sell the 25% back to the other 3 partners or the company itself, and get a cash payout for that. So it gives them an opportunity, not only an opportunity for you to maintain control of your business, but also gives the spouse of your deceased partner, deceased co-owner, gives them cash, gives them money in their pocket and financial security. So you have peace of mind as well. So that way, you can enter into that agreement as the person who's the frontline, partner in business, and say, well, if something happens to me, I've done something to take care of my spouse down the line. If something does happen to me in the situation where they don't have to be burdened by this, they can get a monetary payment, liquidate that. It's almost in a way, in that sense, like a form of insurance as well. And you can purchase insurance to help protect that if that pops up and you need that as well.
What about when businesses are expanding? I know that's one of the areas we look at here, business expansion. What are you looking at for businesses that are growing, maybe opening up a second place or whatever, or hiring?
Again, I think the businesses that are expanding, we're looking possibly at your marketing and development systems, finance and accounting. What are your operational systems like? Or is it? Are you ready to expand? Are you ready to grow? A lot of that also, if you get into a position, there may be a lot of people on this call who are building up a business looking to sell at some point, right?
Yeah.
Looking to build something up and to move it on, right? To say, okay, I want to, my dream is to start, this. I've got this great idea. My nephew, as a matter of fact, did that. He was involved in the tech business up in Silicon Valley. Got in with a group of folks who developed games for your phone, and they ended up getting bought by a much bigger fish and made a lot of money. And then he moves on to the next entrepreneurial venture that he wants to do. In this case, it's the same thing. You may be trying to package your business to sell, package your business to expand. So we go in and make sure that you're all set up, that you don't have any areas of exposure, that you've got all of your internal systems taken care of, that the business can operate possibly, hopefully, a bit independent of you, right? So if something happens to you, your business can continue on and you can sell it. Some people are involved in businesses where, they're completely dependent on goodwill. Goodwill meaning that the goodwill of the owner, that people come to the business because of you, not necessarily what you're selling, right? They like dealing with you. So those businesses, they take different, it's a different analysis than it is if, say, you've got a piece of intellectual property or something proprietary that you've developed, and in that has a ton of value independent of you. So in those cases, a lot of times we will recommend, if you've got intellectual property, you've got a product that is protectable by way of a patent, or you've got marketing stuff that's protectable by way of a trademark and systems that you do, a lot of times we'll tell people to hold that separately from the rest of your actual day-to-day business. because that's the stuff sometimes that really has heavy duty value, right? So it's, and also if you're expanding, you may want to do something where, if you're looking to open multiple locations, you may have a company or may set up a business that will actually own, that'll actually run the other businesses that you set up. You set them up
Okay.
individually and have a holding company or something or a management company that handles those things for you. So
Very interesting. And when you're a business owner, and at some point you think about exiting the business, what sort of discussions do you have about bringing management into the business or bringing family into the business? Like, how do you make sure that's done right?
well, I think, in those cases, we have, lots of ways of advising clients on transitions, like if they're
Yeah.
looking to transition in and out of the business. I mean, you may run into a situation where, your family, your kids don't want to be in the business later on. Maybe they want to go to college and do something else. I know I read an article not too long ago about a lot of people that own, like Chinese restaurants who came to the United States, and these restaurants all of a sudden, the people love these places. Then they show up one day and the restaurant's closed. It's closed because the owner's retired and there's nobody left to run the business because their whole
Right.
goal was to work their butts off in that business, make enough money to send their kids to school so they could go on and do something else, right?
Yeah.
Same with my family. My family, my dad and my brothers own Mexican restaurants in Orange County. My dad worked for El Torito for years, and my family business is a restaurant business, but they did well enough to provide me with an opportunity to make a choice as to what I wanted to do. Right. My
Right.
dad
Right.
came, he was an immigrant from Mexico City, and pulled himself up by his bootstraps and made a good enough living where I could go to school and not necessarily have to do what he did. Right. I could do
Right.
something else. So you may end up in situations where kids don't want to necessarily be in the business. Maybe you've got then instead of the kids, you've got somebody who's your loyal right-hand person who's worked for you for years. Right. And who's really helped you build the value up on that business and has done it in a way where, you feel like I want to pass the business along to them. So there's ways of doing buy-sell agreements with those employees, those key employees to pass the business along to them if you want to when you retire. There's also creative compensation agreements like phantom equity plans and things where you can incentivize top employees that you have with bonuses that equate to growth in the business, right? So they're not necessarily getting equity or ownership, but they're compensated like an owner. And so it makes them feel like they have skin in the game. Plus, it keeps them, tied to the business. We sometimes call those golden handcuffs. So that way too. And a lot of times a change of ownership event or sale of the business will trigger a payment to that employee in that regard. Well, you can kind of take care of two birds with one stone because you can compensate your employee, and then on the sale you can compensate your family. But even
Right.
if you have your kids that you want to bring into the business, you should treat them just like you would any other employee and bring them along kind of in the same way, because most businesses, when they fail in the second generation, not the first, because the first
Right.
is the one who had to work their butt off, develop the ideas, the problems, the sweat equity, all the other stuff that goes with building and running a business. It's usually the family that it's handed off to that doesn't have that same kind of motivation and tenacity and hunger and sometimes street smarts that the person who started the business has. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, interesting comment. I gotta mention estate planning here, and estate planning for business owners, because I know that it's a very important component of overall planning, even as a business owner. And so, David, with estate planning, that's your wills and your trusts and getting that done. I know I've heard you talk many times before that it's going to happen to everybody, and if you don't take control of it, then the courts, will step in. But when it comes to a business, how do you integrate the business into your estate plan?
that's funny. The death and taxes, right, are the two things that
Yeah.
are always inevitable. You can kind of put off death through better physical health, I guess, and you can put out, you can minimize your taxes through better planning, but eventually, you're going to have to pay on both ends, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So your estate plan, you can use that to, basically you transfer your owner. Well, let me step back. Everybody should have, especially if you own a business, should have an estate plan. Now, as Paul mentioned, that's like a will and a trust and powers of attorney for your health care. So, and for your property management, property decisions, and businesses are your property, right? They're part of what
Right.
makes up your property. So the powers, the will and the trust are there if you die. If you've taken good care of your trust, you've transferred all your stuff into trust, a will wouldn't have a lot of import other than to maybe determine how your kids are going to be handled, who's going to raise your kids, who's going to manage their money, and then anything outside the trust, it'll operate to put that into the trust, the will, for example.
Right.
The trust should have ownership of your businesses. You should transfer the ownership of your businesses into your trust. So, what a trust is. A trust isn't an asset protection vehicle, but really it's a distribution plan. So if something happens to you, this is how you're going to divvy up your assets, including your business, your home or businesses, your cars, whatever you have that you want to possibly leave to your kids, your wife, your dog, what have you. Powers of attorney are there to protect you in the case that you get really sick and unconscious, but you haven't yet died, right? So you're in a vegetative state or a time where you can't, you're indisposed of otherwise. It basically it's a roadmap that you provide for somebody you trust to make decisions for you while you're in that state. And that means decisions regarding your health care, like what kind of health care you want to receive, or if you want to receive none at all, or on property, how you want your affairs managed while you're under. You can give people incredibly wide latitude or give them small latitude, but either way, you give somebody you trust direction on how to deal with your person and your estate. So powers of attorney, will, and a trust, I think, are a must for everyone, especially for folks here who are entrepreneurs and running their own business. So
Yeah, because a problem is that if if you're running a business, let's say you're bringing the kids into the business. We see this a lot, and there's different ownership stakes, right? Maybe the parents or one of the parents, they have ownership, kids have some ownership, and now the parents are getting older, they don't have a living trust in place. And now even if they start getting into cognitive decline, right? Or, worse, they're passing away, they have ownership piece in the business, and now they're going to probate. So their assets, including the stake in the business, correct me if I'm wrong, is now probated. And so, that's could be a hornet's nest, right?
yeah, definitely. I think estate plans are not really expensive to do, but again, it's a
Right.
situation where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, because the pound of cure in probate can be extensive. From legal fees, interruptions and disruptions in the business. Probate is when you don't have a will and a trust, and you have to go to court to have the court divvy up your assets and decide how they're going to be distributed.
Right.
Probate's expensive. It can take 6 months to a year or more to work its way through the system. Whereas trust administration, if someone is just doling out assets under a trust, is a hell of a lot cheaper than probate,
Right.
and it's way, way, way quicker than probate as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, any other hot button issues, David, you want to mention here as we get sort of to the latter part of our talk?
Yeah, I think circling back with the and this is all part of the 50-point business checkup, the things we've discussed. But doing like things like doing like due diligence, like essentially we look at your business like, or any, or, whoever does this for you, will look at your business like I was going to buy it. Like I wanted to buy your business. So I'm going to do full due diligence. I'm going to look at your contracts, look at your insurance, look at your relationships, your employees, your employee handbooks, how your assets are held, how your intellectual property is held, intellectual property being one of your assets, but sometimes that's a really, huge asset. Your real property leases, your equipment leases. Is the business holding way too much cash? Should you take the cash and put that in some other entity that you can make work for you in some way, shape, or form? We often will recommend to clients to only keep cash for their minimum business needs, to take the other cash and do something else with it, so the business isn't a big fat cash target. Obviously cash needs for working capital, things of that nature.
Of course.
If you buy yo-yos, it's money to buy yo-yos, right? And put them in your warehouse. Yeah. Make sure your formalities are taken care of on the business side. And let's face it, a business that's well maintained is a valuable business. Right. A well-maintained business where you can anticipate and button up deficiencies or problems to the best of your ability is going to be worth a lot more to you should you decide to exit the business, cash out, and move on, and either move on to a new business or buy an island in the South Pacific, or just even send your kids to college, right? So, yeah. So the 50-point checkup is really aimed towards helping you not only limit your liability, but maintain the value of your business and make it something that where you don't have to worry about things keeping you up at night. So.
Yeah, and I think it might be less expensive to buy the island than it would be to send your kid to college these days.
These days, I'm finding that out. I got a daughter who's going next year, and college is not a cheap proposition by any stretch. Here's for in-state tuition, right? With the
absolutely junior college first if you're going to go. Well, great. Well, do we want to bring on some Q&A opportunity now?
Thank you, Paul. My God, you were asking the perfect questions, and David addressed them very truly. I have a few questions for you, David. The first one that came in is in regards to the legal structure of a business, and this came from an exporter actually, who is thinking about incorporating in the U.S. so he can have like a subsidiary of a Mexican company. So what legal structure would you recommend? It's a small company, but what would you recommend?
I don't know enough, I guess, in this seminar to be able to answer that question really, really well. I don't want to give faulty legal advice without kind of knowing full circle about what's going on. But there are definitely ways of doing that. And if you wanted to talk to us about it, we could definitely, speak to you about it some more. My family still does quite a bit of business in Mexico. So, so I'd be more than happy to talk about that offline. So
perfect. I'll let him know because, you're right. Every case, it has a specific or have specifics that need to be addressed before you recommend a legal structure. Following up on the legal structure, we have a lot of like sole proprietors or self-employed, and when it comes to choosing between C corp, S corp, or LLC, again, I know it's a very open question, but is there like a more common legal structure for a sole proprietor who wants to start protecting their assets?
I would probably say in that situation, maybe an LLC that is taxed as an S corp.
Okay.
Again, I couch that with a disclaimer that I don't know much about the individual, the business, or what's going on in that regard, or something where that they put the business in an entity with some sort of pass-through taxation, right? So, and a lot of times a business holding LLC will recommend be formed as an LLC that's taxed as an S corp if it's if it's a business. If it's real property you're looking to protect or personal property, we would recommend an LLC that's a disregarded entity usually, where there's complete pass through on the tax, but it also there are tax issues with the property that is held and those kind of things that you don't want to mess up either. And it's always a good, I'm a lawyer but not a CPA. I know, I slept in a Holiday Inn Express last night. Have you seen that commercial? Where the person, goes and does surgery or what have you. But I don't want to pretend to know more than a CPA or a trusted tax advisor that someone has. So I would always say, no matter what our recommendations are on tax are, it's always good to run them by a certified public accountant to make sure that it fits with their situation and with your overall financial goals as well.
Perfect. And for a U.S. Company that is considering foreign investors, what's the best legal structure?
Again, that's one of those where I think, we'd have to sit down and look at it some more. I totally appreciate the pointed questions, but it's one of those situations where without knowing,
the specifics,
full circle about the specifics. Yeah. And so
David, are there issues with foreign investors specific to foreign investors when you take that are?
Yeah, definitely. Yes. There's issues usually on both ends sometimes with not only here in the US, but also with whatever, foreign, we use Mexico as an example. There might be some issues, in terms of the Mexican law, Mexican tax structures that maybe have to be dealt with. And also just, in terms of being able to pick a certain type of entity. I know a lot of foreign investment folks will go the C Corp route to do that, or maybe go as an LLC taxed as a C Corp if they want to go that way as well. But I'm thinking, S Corps these days, a lot of the restrictions on foreign shareholders have been lifted. But still, that's kind of the lingering thing. But I'd have to look at the situation probably a little more specifically and concretely.
David, you mentioned in the beginning of your presentation that contracts should be reviewed from time to time. How often do you recommend to review your legal contracts?
I would say at least once a year. Laws change every year. Look at COVID, for example, right? COVID, all of a sudden, when COVID became a thing, there's a legal clause or legal language called force majeure, which is is French for like a act of God type scenario, which a lot of contracts have as boilerplate language, but a lot of them don't. When I say boilerplate, meaning standard stuff, right? Standard clauses, where it says that if there's an act of God or an act of war or terrorism, or in this case, a pandemic, right, where you could suspend the contract while you're unable to, that makes you unable to fulfill the contract terms, right? That you basically suspend the contract or cancel it because of that, right? Gives you an out either way. Well, nobody really cared too much about force majeure until COVID hit. And then all of a sudden, force majeure became a huge thing. Because people, COVID, just the world stopped turning pretty much. And now even you just need to look at foreign events like in Ukraine, for example, where military action that we didn't really foresee 5, 6, 10 years ago is now coming to the forefront. So so things change. Things are constantly shifting in the world, and you constantly need to have people who know what they're doing, look at your contracts and make sure you're 100% or as close to 100% protected as you can be.
Perfect. You mentioned also, a lot of businesses lack of certain stuff like procedures, contracts, lease issues, etc. In the last 14 years, I have heard, from members of the associations that have had issues with leases. And I'm sure that you have several times. What would you recommend to anyone who's planning to lease a property in the next few months? What are some of the recommendations that you wanna give them?
pay a lawyer for an hour of their time to look at it for you,
Mm-hmm.
an hour, maybe even two. But within that, no matter how big the lease usually is, they can look at it and kind of tell you, hey, I think this is great. I think this is terrible. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't sign it with this in, or I would do. Ultimately, what all a lawyer can do is make recommendations to the client, right? And the client has the ultimate decision on whether or not to go through with something. It's like going to the doctor. Doctor will tell you what I think is wrong with you, right? I think, this is what I think's wrong with you. There's like 5 different ways we can treat it. And then the patient has to make the decision, okay, which one of those 5 or all those 5, or do I want to take or enter into? It's the same thing with a lawyer. A lawyer can at least look at the contract and
Mm-hmm.
tell you what they think. Is this something that's kind of standard language? Is the lease really tilted in favor of the landlord, which, it usually is when you first get the draft, right? Or is it something that's a little more tenant friendly? And the same thing with personal guarantees. You can negotiate personal guarantees. You don't have to sign the one that they stick in front of you all the time.
Yeah.
And granted, if you're a big business and you've been in business for a long time, the business can stand on its own 2 feet really well, then you may have a bit more leverage in dealing with a personal guarantee than you are if you're just starting a business and you have no track record and not a lot of money behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even still, you could try to pick at it and try to limit the personal guarantee. Maybe you limit the personal guarantee to certain assets that you have. Maybe you say, I'm not going to sign the personal guarantee at all, and see if they'll still lease the building. Maybe you just say, okay, the personal guarantee is going, if the company this is a 5-year lease, the company stays good on its rent for 3 years, the personal guarantee is done, gets burned off. Those are things that you could try to do to minimize your liability. And it's, it's like put it in soccer terms, right? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Right. So you might as well take your shot, man. It may find the corner of the net. You never know. Right. So
I agree. The last one that I have on my end, David, it's in regards to acquisitions.
Okay.
Does your practice help with acquisition assessments?
Yes, definitely. In terms of doing due diligence or serving as counsel for either a buyer or seller in a transaction. Yes. We definitely can help with all that stuff: contracts, due diligence, all the things that you need to get done.
And that's another thing that I highly recommend you guys to talk to a lawyer, because oftentimes you get on paper what it looks to be perfect, and it looks like a great deal, and then you are acquiring a business with a lot of potential, but it's the fine print that can get you in trouble in those transactions. So it's important that you talk to experts like David and his firm, right, David?
No doubt. Yes. And it's not just me, but I mean, California, there are tons of lawyers, right? So a lot of people sometimes just think, oh, I can never afford a lawyer, or they just don't want to have to deal with a lawyer because they look at a lawyer as being part of the system or whatever. But you can negotiate with lawyers too. There's nothing to say that you can't negotiate with them on rates, that you can't find somebody that works for you. You may run into a lawyer who says, no, this is what my fee is, and I don't budge. But do your due diligence in shopping for attorneys. Find people who not only who you feel are really good, but people that you can work with and people that you can trust. But I think it's always better, again, you miss all the shots you don't take. So if you go into something without a lawyer and figure I don't need one, it's a small deal or something, I can do this myself, then sometimes you run risks, especially if the other side has lawyers, right? Or has a lawyer who you're dealing with as well. So
Right.
And like I said, it all depends on your budget, all depends on the money you have, all depends on your ability to make that work.
And the last one, and then this one comes from me. We have some businesses that are starting to look into doing business with corporations and with the government, private and public procurement. Is that something that your firm can help out to, like review those contracts, help these businesses like enter into these relationships with a solid legal foundation?
Most definitely, we could definitely help with that. And if there are areas of government expertise where we possibly might need help, we could also refer to people who could do those types of things. I've been practicing law for 30 years now, so I've got my own experience, and I know the things I'm good at and the things I enjoy. I know the things that I'm not good at and the things I don't enjoy. And for the things I'm not good at or I don't enjoy, I know people, that's their passion. That's what they love doing. We have people in our firm who do different things than I do. And I also have a huge network of people that I can refer to, not only in the legal fields, but in finance and capital and accounting, HR, you name it. I've got a full bank of referral sources, in my quiver that I could help people deal with as well. So
that's perfect. Anything else that you guys would like to add before we leave?
I just want to say thank you for having both of us. Yeah, it was a pleasure to be here.
yes,
No,
definitely.
David?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you to everyone who's participated today. It's been an honor, a privilege. I appreciate the invite, and I wish you all, 100% success in all of your endeavors and a great rest of the week.
No, thank you guys. And David's contact information and Paul, it's on the website. If you click on the link on provided on this video and the description of this live, you're gonna go straight to the website, and all the information is there. But also, if you want us to introduce you via email, we can also do that, and you know how to reach us, guys. So thank you to everyone who watched this live, and for any of those that are going to be watching it later, make sure that you share it, leave comments. If you have any questions, we can always redirect them to David and Paul. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and have an awesome week. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, David.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Peace out, guys. Thank you very much.
Bye.